Sometimes life waits for you in the quietest moments. Aisha Bennett stood by the tall windows of her Brooklyn apartment, the early morning sunlight filtering through sheer curtains and casting a soft gold glow across the hardwood floors. She adjusted the tiny bows on her twins' baby blankets, the delicate folds catching the light like miniature halos. Outside, the city hummed with the usual rhythm of Monday, but inside, the apartment was still, almost sacred, as if the world had paused to honor the new life she was holding. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of lavender from the diffuser on the counter, and Aisha took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years. Her reflection in the tall mirror across the room caught her eye, soft eyes lined with traces of fatigue, but there was a subtle fire behind them, a quiet resilience that had carried her through sleepless nights and lonely days since Ethan Caldwell's sudden disappearance 5 years ago. She smoothed her hair back into a neat bun, the act almost ritualistic, a way to collect herself before the day began. On the floor, the twins gurgled softly, their tiny hands stretching toward her as if sensing her presence even before fully opening their eyes. She smiled, a warmth spreading from her chest, the kind of love that demanded no repayment, no recognition, only the joy of being seen by these small souls who had become her universe. The apartment was modest, far from the grandeur she and Ethan had once imagined sharing together, but it was theirs now, sculpted from perseverance, sleepless nights at the pediatric clinic, and the quiet determination to protect what was hers. Aisha's fingers brushed over the baby monitor on the countertop, a sleek device that carried the sound of soft lullabies and coos through the room, a lifeline that connected her to the small world she had created. She paused, listening to the tiny sighs, the rhythmic breaths that reminded her she had survived. She had built a life from the ashes of abandonment. Her mind wandered briefly to the gala 5 years ago, the night that had set everything into motion. Ethan's charming smile, and the promises whispered in the dim light of chandeliers, now a memory tinged with both sweetness and the sharp edge of loss. Outside, the city's pulse continued unabated, taxis honking, people rushing to offices, unaware of the private universe inside the apartment where a mother and her children existed in a perfect bubble of resilience and hope. Aisha crouched down to pick up the twins, holding them close, the light falling on their soft faces and tiny fists. And in that moment, she felt the weight of the years lift, the silence of unspoken grief replaced by the rhythm of heartbeats intertwined, a quiet symphony of life she had nurtured alone. She whispered softly to them, her voice a steady anchor, a promise that no matter the storms ahead, they would always have each other, a testament to survival and the unexpected joys that life, in its own quiet way, could deliver. Outside the window, the morning sun continued its slow climb, illuminating the skyline in shades of gold and amber, and for the first time in years, Aisha felt the pulse of something new. Possibility, the gentle stirring of destiny, and the unspoken hope that perhaps, after all this time, the universe still held a surprise for her, one that might finally bring the echoes of the past and the promises of the future into a single, breathtaking moment. The memory of that gala 5 years ago lingered like a faint melody, soft yet impossible to ignore. Ethan Caldwell had stood in the center of the grand ballroom, the crystal chandeliers scattering light across polished marble floors, his tailored navy suit fitting like armor against the currents of expectation and desire swirling around him. The memory of Aisha Bennett, her deep brown skin glowing under the ambient light, her laughter threading through the orchestral notes of the evening, was both a comfort and a pang he had carried silently through the years. Outside, Manhattan sprawled beneath him in a constellation of lights, but within, he had been caught in a gravitational pull he could not name, the kind that made every promise whispered and every glance shared feel monumental, as though fate itself had scripted that encounter. The night had ended abruptly, a sudden business call pulling him away from a conversation he had wanted to prolong, leaving Aisha with only a fleeting smile and a sense of potential unfulfilled. In the years that followed, Ethan built an empire across 3 continents, his name synonymous with precision and success, yet every board meeting, every acquisition, every meticulously planned merger carried an echo of that one night, an imperceptible hollow where something tender and real should have resided. Aisha, unaware of the impact she had left, navigated her own path with grace, the twins in her care shaping her days and nights. Yet even amidst the fatigue and constant motion, memories of that evening rose unbidden, a reminder that life could pivot on the smallest of moments. On this particular morning, she dressed the twins in soft pastel onesies, the sunlight catching the curls on their heads and glinting off the tiny gold bracelets she had saved for each from her first paycheck after returning to full-time work. The apartment hummed with life in subtle ways. The gentle whir of the refrigerator, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor, the distant wail of a siren on the avenue below. She carried them into the living room where the rug was carefully arranged for play, and as their tiny hands reached for her, she felt the continuity of existence, the quiet assertion that she had survived, that she had built something indestructible. Her thoughts drifted to the charity event she had agreed to attend that evening, a gala she had accepted more out of habit than desire, yet now imagined with an undercurrent of possibility she could not yet name. Meanwhile, Ethan, miles away in the glass and steel tower that bore his name, adjusted the cufflinks on his sleeves, staring out over the city skyline with a clarity sharpened by habit and decades of relentless attention. Yet even amidst spreadsheets, boardroom pressures, and conference calls, his mind returned, unbidden, to that night, to the smile, the cadence of her voice, the subtle sway as she moved through the crowd. A message flashed across his phone, innocuous to anyone else but impossible to ignore, an invitation to the very charity gala that would bring them back into the same space, the same air, under circumstances neither could have anticipated. He paused, fingers resting against the polished glass desk, and for the first time in years, allowed himself the consideration of the unthinkable, that destiny was still at work, that the past might reach out to him in ways calculated neither by his mind nor his ambition. Across town, Aisha carefully packed a small bag for the twins, including blankets, diapers, and a few toys that might make the evening tolerable, never imagining the convergence of histories that awaited her. The elevator ride down to the street was punctuated by the city's familiar noises, the honking of cars, footsteps against concrete, the distant thrum of subways underground. Yet within that ordinary soundscape, a quiet anticipation threaded through her, the subtle pulse of impending change. She stepped into the back of a town car, leather soft beneath her fingers, and as the vehicle began its smooth glide through Manhattan traffic, she allowed herself a thought that felt both reckless and unavoidable. Perhaps the night held more than just a social obligation. Perhaps it carried the possibility of closure, of recognition, of the moment when past and present would collide in a way that no one could ignore. The twins stirred softly, their eyes fluttering, and she whispered to them with a tone both gentle and resolute, a declaration that whatever awaited them, she would meet it with grace, with patience, and with the quiet strength that had defined her years since Ethan's departure. The sun lowered in the sky, painting the skyscrapers in amber and rose, casting long shadows that stretched across avenues and parks, echoing the stretching threads of their lives that were about to entwine once more. In that quiet moment between preparation and departure, between the mundane and the extraordinary, Aisha and Ethan existed in parallel, unaware of how close the threads of fate had drawn them, yet inevitably moving toward the collision that would mark the beginning of a chapter neither had dared to imagine, but both had carried within their hearts for half a decade. Aisha stepped out of the town car onto the polished stone steps of the grand Manhattan venue, the twins nestled safely against her chest in a soft, coordinating wrap. The evening air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of the river below and the distant rumble of evening traffic. She adjusted her dress, a deep emerald green that complemented her skin and seemed to catch the ambient light with each step, flowing like a quiet statement of confidence and purpose. The doors opened to reveal a hall of soft golden light, reflecting off crystal chandeliers and the polished wood floors that led into the main event space. Guests moved gracefully across the room, their laughter low and elegant, the soft clink of glasses adding rhythm to the orchestral background music. Every detail of the venue suggested a world of wealth and precision, yet Aisha walked through it with a serenity born from years of careful navigation and self-reliance. As she passed the reception tables, she noticed the delicate floral arrangements in pale cream and blush, each bloom positioned with thoughtful precision, a subtle echo of her own meticulous preparation for the evening. The twins stirred slightly in her arms, their small heads leaning against her shoulder, and she smiled softly, whispering gentle reassurances, the cadence of her voice steady and soothing, as though each word could anchor them to the calm she carried within herself. From across the room, Ethan Caldwell observed the scene with a mixture of anticipation and restrained emotion, his posture perfect, the tailored lines of his suit emphasizing the quiet strength and control he was known for in the corporate world. Yet as his gaze fell upon the familiar figure of Aisha, his breath caught in a subtle but unmistakable way, a reminder that no measure of distance or time could erase the impact of that first encounter years ago. The emerald dress, the careful poise, the way she moved while holding the twins, all converged into a vision that stirred memories he had thought he had compartmentalized, each one a note in a melody he now realized had been playing quietly beneath the surface of his meticulously organized life. Aisha made her way to a table near the center of the room, her movements smooth, deliberate, commanding attention without demanding it, and Ethan felt an unfamiliar tension, a shift in the rhythm of the evening that made the world seem narrower, focused entirely on her presence. As she settled the twins in a comfortable seating arrangement beside her, their tiny eyes wide and curious, Ethan took a slow, measured step forward, the polished floors reflecting the soft golden light, each step bridging the gap of years in absence. The music, the murmurs of polite conversation, and the subtle rustle of gowns seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the quiet weight of recognition and anticipation that stretched taut between them. Aisha looked up, her gaze sweeping the room with calm purpose, and for a brief instant, their eyes met. There was no need for words. The silence spoke volumes, conveying the passage of time, the trials endured, and the quiet resilience that both had. Nurtured independently, each heartbeat echoed with the possibility of connection, the latent power of shared history, and the unspoken understanding that the evening might carry consequences neither had fully anticipated, but both were now ready to meet. In that suspended moment, the city outside continued its relentless pulse, skyscrapers aglow in the twilight, cars streaming beneath them like veins of light, and within the walls of the venue, two lives, shaped by memory, absence, and endurance, prepared to intersect once more under the quiet majesty of crystal chandeliers and the soft watchfulness of a room full of elegant strangers. The twins nestled safely between them, the embodiment of hope, continuity, and the gentle persistence of fate. Aisha's breath caught as she felt the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the warmth of the room now carrying an unspoken tension that drew her attention to the far side of the hall. Ethan Caldwell stood near the entrance, hands loosely at his sides, the contours of his tailored suit catching the soft light and emphasizing the familiar strength she remembered so vividly. Time seemed to slow as their gazes met again, her deep brown eyes locking with his gray steel ones, and for a fleeting moment, the world beyond the gala faded, leaving only the invisible thread that had tied their histories together across 5 long years. The twins stirred gently in her arms, sensing the subtle change in her heartbeat, and she adjusted their wraps with a careful hand, grounding herself in the present, the weight of the past settling quietly around her shoulders but no longer threatening to overwhelm her. Guests continued to move around them, the low hum of polite conversation and soft orchestral music blending into a backdrop that seemed almost distant, a muted stage for a reunion neither of them had anticipated, but both had unconsciously awaited. Ethan's eyes traced the gentle lines of her face, the way her hair was pulled back neatly, and the soft curve of her smile as she whispered to the twins, each word deliberate, each gesture carrying a subtle authority that spoke of years of resilience and quiet determination. He felt a stir of something he had not allowed himself to acknowledge for years, a mixture of regret, longing, and a fragile hope that the past might find its way into the present without shattering the careful lives they had built separately. Aisha moved through the room with measured grace, her steps confident yet unassuming, and Ethan found himself unconsciously adjusting his own posture, as though the memory of the first time he had seen her had come alive and demanded recognition. She paused briefly to greet a few colleagues, her smile polite yet distant, maintaining the decorum she had mastered over the years, and Ethan noticed how effortlessly she commanded attention without demanding it, a quiet power that reminded him of everything he had admired and yet left unspoken. The twins yawned, tiny fists curling toward her chest, and she adjusted them gently, murmuring words that only they could understand, a soft cadence that carried warmth and reassurance. Ethan felt an unfamiliar ache, a combination of awe and humility, as he watched the scene unfold, recognizing the culmination of years of growth, challenges, and quiet victories that had shaped her into someone entirely her own. Across the room, the crystal chandeliers reflected the golden light onto the polished floors, sending small prisms dancing in patterns that seemed almost intentional, a subtle echo of the way fate had threaded their paths together. Each step Aisha took brought her closer to the central space, where conversations paused momentarily as eyes turned, not in curiosity alone, but in recognition of a presence that carried history and quiet authority. Ethan inhaled deeply, the subtle scent of her perfume reaching him despite the distance, familiar yet changed, a delicate reminder of moments past, and the imperceptible growth time had etched into them both. She set the twins down carefully on a small play mat arranged nearby, ensuring their comfort while maintaining her composure, and as she straightened, their small hands reaching for her once again, Ethan felt the invisible barrier of years begin to dissolve, leaving a space filled with anticipation, reflection, and the unspoken understanding that the night held more than social obligations. It carried the weight of memory, the possibility of acknowledgement, and the quiet promise of paths, converging in a way neither could yet fully articulate, but both sensed with acute clarity. A soft murmur of conversation drifted across the gala hall as Aisha adjusted the twins in her arms, their small heads leaning against her shoulders, and she felt the warmth of the evening settle around her like a familiar cloak. The chandeliers above refracted light across the polished wood floors, sending soft, golden prisms dancing into the room, each one catching the eye like a delicate reminder of the care that had gone into every detail of this event. Ethan Caldwell watched from a distance, his posture poised and deliberate, yet there was a subtle tension in his shoulders that betrayed the calm exterior he presented to the world. He noticed the way she moved, graceful and deliberate, each step measured yet natural, a testament to the years she had spent balancing responsibility, resilience, and the quiet power of independence. The twins shifted in her embrace, tiny fingers curling around her clothing, and she whispered softly to them, her voice carrying a rhythm both gentle and commanding, a cadence that seemed to anchor the small world she had created. Across the room, Ethan felt the familiar pull of recognition and memory, a soft ache that reminded him of the night they had first met, of conversations left unfinished and promises never fully spoken. Aisha glanced toward the stage, her eyes catching the subtle play of light against the gold and cream floral arrangements, and for a moment she allowed herself a breath, a brief pause in the careful orchestration of her evening. As she moved closer to the central area where other guests were gathering, she noticed the small interactions around her, the smiles and quiet gestures, and she felt a subtle satisfaction in how she navigated the space, attentive to her surroundings, yet entirely present with her children. Ethan adjusted his tie, taking a slow step forward, the polished marble reflecting the soft glow of the chandeliers, and for a brief instant, he imagined the thread of years and distance unraveling, allowing him to approach the moments they had missed together. Aisha crouched slightly, adjusting the twins so that they were secure and comfortable, their eyes wide and curious, taking in the elegant hall and the gentle movement of guests around them. Ethan felt a flutter of emotion as he noted the small details, the way she spoke softly, how the light caught her hair and the subtle folds of her dress, and he realized that the image before him was not just memory, but the culmination of years, of growth, of the quiet strength that had always been there, but had matured into something he could no longer overlook. The orchestra shifted softly in the background, the music weaving through the hall and adding a layer of warmth to the air, and Ethan took another step, his gaze fixed on her, sensing the unspoken distance that had persisted and the potential for connection that hung in the space between them. Guests moved in and out of their peripheral vision, a gentle bustle that did not disturb the central focus of the moment, the twins shifting slightly, their tiny hands reaching toward Aisha, who adjusted them with practiced care. She felt a tingle of anticipation, a delicate sense that the evening held more than appearances and social niceties. It carried the weight of years, the possibility of recognition, and the quiet promise that some threads of life, no matter how stretched or strained, had a way of weaving back together when the timing was right. Ethan took another measured step, noticing the subtle curve of her smile as she interacted with a passing guest, the quiet confidence in her movements, and the unmistakable glow of maternal pride that surrounded the twins. The chandeliers above seemed to shimmer more brightly in that instant, the reflections dancing like tiny beacons across the floor, and both of them, separated by only a few feet, yet by the vast expanse of years and circumstance, felt the pulse of anticipation, the silent acknowledgement that what had begun long ago was now unfolding into something tangible, a moment suspended in time, fragile yet undeniable, and waiting for the next step to be taken. Aisha felt a subtle shift in the energy of the room as she guided the twins gently toward a quieter corner, their soft coos blending with the muted orchestra in the background. Each step she took was measured, deliberate, a reflection of the patience and precision she had cultivated over the years while navigating life alone. Ethan Caldwell watched from across the hall, the light catching the edges of his tailored suit and highlighting the sharp lines that had become synonymous with his reputation. Yet in that moment, the carefully constructed barrier of formality he maintained in business and society seemed to soften ever so slightly. Her eyes met his briefly, and in that fleeting instant, 1,000 memories passed silently between them. The laughter, the unspoken understanding, the ache of absence, and the quiet resilience that had shaped them both. The twins shifted in her embrace, tiny fingers grasping instinctively, and she murmured reassurances with a tone that was at once nurturing and unwavering, a soft echo of the strength that had carried her through countless long nights and early mornings. Ethan took a careful step forward, the polished floors reflecting the warm glow of chandeliers above, and he felt the weight of years and distance in the space that stretched between them, a tension held together by memory and anticipation. The music swelled softly, a gentle undercurrent to the subtle hum of conversation, and Aisha allowed herself to pause, noting the delicate interplay of light and shadow across the floral arrangements, the soft folds of fabric, the quiet attentiveness of the staff, all orchestrated to create an environment of elegance and warmth. She adjusted the twins, making sure they were comfortable, and in that small, intimate action, Ethan saw not just the woman he had once known, but a vision of enduring care and steadfast resolve, the embodiment of all that time had refined and strengthened. Aisha's gaze swept the room, scanning faces and movements, and the brief glances she exchanged with Ethan were charged with the unspoken recognition, curiosity, and a cautious hope that what had been lost could somehow be acknowledged without words. The chandeliers above scattered golden reflections that danced across the hall, drawing attention to the subtle gestures, the slight tilt of a head, the way she carried herself, the quiet interaction with her children, that together formed a narrative of resilience and grace. Ethan felt his pulse quicken imperceptibly, a response to the harmony of presence, memory, and expectation converging in a single moment. The twins nestled between them like living symbols of continuity and promise. Each step he took toward her was measured and deliberate, a conscious effort to bridge not just the physical distance but the years of absence and unspoken thoughts that lay between them. The soft murmur of guests, the gentle rustle of gowns, the occasional chime of glassware, all became peripheral to the central focus of the evening. The subtle magnetic pull between two lives that had diverged yet remained connected by the invisible threads of experience, endurance, and the quiet power of human connection. Aisha felt the slight change in the air, a whisper of anticipation that made her senses heighten, yet she remained grounded, her movements composed and elegant, her voice gentle as she cooed softly to the twins, ensuring their comfort and security even as her mind registered the unmistakable presence of Ethan drawing nearer. The moment stretched, taut with possibility, and the room seemed to hold its collective breath, the golden light refracting across the space as though the environment itself recognized the significance of the encounter, the convergence of lives, histories, and hopes that were about to unfold with subtle but profound clarity. In the midst of the soft orchestral music, the distant hum of traffic beyond the windows, and the muted conversations around them, Ethan and Aisha existed in a bubble of suspended time, their pasts and presents colliding gently, yet insistently, each gesture and glance carrying the weight of unspoken words, quiet acknowledgments, and the delicate promise that the evening might finally allow for reconciliation, recognition, and the tentative first steps toward the shared future that both had long imagined in the silent spaces of memory. Aisha walked slowly through the softly lit room, the twins nestled securely in her arms, their gentle breaths a comforting rhythm against her chest, and each step she took seemed to carry the accumulated weight of years filled with quiet struggle and relentless care. The golden light from the chandeliers above reflected off the polished marble floors, casting delicate patterns that danced along the walls, a subtle celebration of the elegance and effort infused into the evening. Ethan Caldwell's gaze followed her with careful attention, noting the grace with which she moved, the effortless balance of strength and tenderness that had become her signature over the years, and he felt a quiet pull within him, a mixture of awe, regret, and anticipation that made each heartbeat seem louder, more insistent. Guests around them continued their conversations and movements, but for Ethan and Aisha, the world had condensed into the narrow space between them, each glance charged with recognition and unspoken history. Aisha adjusted the twins with a gentle movement, their tiny hands curling instinctively around her fingers, and she whispered softly to them, the cadence of her voice steady and nurturing, a subtle display of resilience and calm that had been cultivated over sleepless nights and long days of dedication. The soft hum of the orchestra, the gentle clink of glassware, and the murmur of distant conversations became a quiet backdrop, almost imperceptible, as if the entire room were holding space for the moment that was about to unfold. Ethan took a slow, deliberate step closer, the polished floors beneath his shoes reflecting the soft golden light, each reflection an echo of the years that had passed, of decisions made, of paths diverged and experiences lived apart. He observed the small, deliberate gestures she made, the way her eyes scanned the room briefly before settling on the twins, the careful balance she maintained between attending to them and remaining aware of her surroundings. There was a tension in the air, subtle yet unmistakable, a quiet anticipation that neither could name but both felt deeply, the kind of energy that made the space between two people feel both immense and intimately charged with possibility. Aisha's eyes flicked toward the far side of the hall, catching sight of Ethan's precise posture and the controlled calm he projected, and she felt a familiar ache, a recognition of all that had been and all that had been lost, mingled with the steady confidence of the woman she had become. The twins shifted slightly, their movements gentle, and she adjusted them once more, whispering soft reassurances, her tone carrying authority and warmth in equal measure, a reminder that despite everything, they were safe, nurtured, and loved. Ethan's eyes lingered on her, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the small but deliberate motions that spoke volumes about her strength, independence, and grace, and he realized that the distance of years and circumstance had done little to diminish the presence and impact she carried. The room seemed to hum with quiet energy, the reflections of chandeliers tracing moving patterns across walls and floors, echoing the invisible threads of history, hope, and the persistent pull of fate drawing them closer. Each measured step Ethan took brought him nearer, not just physically but emotionally, as he felt the years of absence compress into a single charged moment, the anticipation of reconnection mingling with memories of beginnings, missteps, and the quiet endurance that had defined their separate lives. Aisha's gaze softened as she felt the subtle shift, the almost imperceptible change in the rhythm of her heartbeat, and she allowed herself a brief acknowledgement of what was coming, a quiet readiness to face it with grace, patience, and the calm strength she had honed over years of solitary resilience. The twins, nestled against her chest, seemed to sense the shift as well, their tiny breaths steady and untroubled, grounding her in the present even. As history, memory, and the weight of unspoken emotions hovered in the space between them. The ambient light caught in Ethan's eyes, and he stepped just enough closer to bridge the physical and emotional distance, the tension between them building subtly, powerfully, as they prepared, perhaps unknowingly, for the first real contact after years of separation, the quiet promise of acknowledgement and reconciliation lingering like a gentle current through the room. Aisha felt the subtle shift in the room as conversations continued around her, the twins nestled against her chest, their soft movements grounding her in the present. The chandeliers above refracted light across the polished floors, creating delicate patterns that danced along the walls, and she walked with a careful, measured grace, each step purposeful and calm. Ethan Caldwell observed her from a few feet away, the polished lines of his suit catching the golden glow, his posture poised yet betraying the quiet tension of anticipation. He noted the way she adjusted the twins, whispering soft reassurances, the gentleness of her tone tempered by the strength she had honed over 5 years of independent life. Every gesture, every glance, seemed imbued with a history neither had fully articulated, the memory of shared moments now colored by the passage of time and the trials each had endured. Aisha moved closer to a quieter area of the hall, allowing the twins a small stretch on the play mat she had arranged with care, their tiny hands exploring the space while she kept a watchful, nurturing presence. Ethan took another step forward, the distance between them narrowing, yet the room felt expansive, filled with light, reflections, and the faint hum of orchestral music that provided an understated backdrop to the charged silence between them. He noticed the subtle strength in her posture, the calm confidence she carried even amidst the social bustle, and he felt a quiet ache, a mixture of admiration and regret, as he reflected on the years lost and the resilience that had grown from them. Aisha's eyes flicked toward him briefly, a recognition that passed without words, carrying the weight of unspoken understanding, the memory of a connection that had never truly faded despite separation. The twins cooed softly, and she responded with a gentle smile, her voice low and steady, a rhythm that seemed to settle the space between them, creating a shared pulse that both acknowledged. Silently, Ethan felt drawn forward by the magnetic pull of that presence, each step deliberate, a careful bridge across time and circumstance, as he watched her interactions, noting the grace, composure, and unwavering focus she brought to her children and the world around her. The golden light continued to shimmer across the hall, dancing on crystal, reflecting across polished wood, and every subtle movement, every soft glance carried significance, each echoing the invisible threads of history, endurance, and quiet power that had always linked them. Aisha shifted the twins slightly, their heads resting against her shoulder, and she felt the gentle pressure of anticipation, the awareness that this evening carried a significance beyond the gala, a moment where past and present, memory and reality, might converge. Ethan took another step, narrowing the space with careful precision, his gaze fixed on her, noting the curves of her expression, the gentle motions of care for the twins, and the subtle radiance that had grown with time and experience. Around them, the hum of the guests, the soft orchestral music, and the shimmer of chandeliers all faded into peripheral awareness as they existed in a quiet bubble of suspended possibility, the unspoken weight of years, absence, and enduring connection bridging the space between them. Aisha felt the shift as well, her senses attuned to the presence, the faint quickening of heartbeat, the anticipation that hummed beneath her composed exterior, and she allowed herself a small, quiet acknowledgement that this night held the potential for reconciliation, for recognition, and for the tentative beginnings of shared understanding. The twins yawned, stretching slightly, and she whispered gentle assurances, the cadence of her voice steady and calm, grounding the moment, while Ethan continued to move closer, the distance of years dissolving in the soft golden glow and the quiet promise of the encounter yet to unfold. Aisha's steps slowed as she sensed the subtle shift in the air, the quiet tension that threaded between her and Ethan Caldwell, becoming almost palpable. The twins nestled comfortably against her chest, their soft sighs grounding her in the moment while she kept her composure, eyes scanning the room with careful attention to every movement and glance around her. Ethan approached, his measured steps echoing lightly across the polished marble floors, the soft glow of the chandeliers reflecting in his gray eyes, the familiar lines of his suit lending him a commanding presence that belied the sudden stir of emotion he felt. She glanced toward him briefly, recognition flaring like a spark, yet her expression remained composed, the strength of years of independence visible in the subtle set of her shoulders and the calm precision of her movements. Around them, the murmurs of other guests, the rustle of elegant gowns, and the soft strains of the orchestra faded into the background, leaving only the quiet, charged space of acknowledgement between two lives that had shared a history, been separated by circumstance, and were now converging once more. Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second, absorbing the sight of her, of the twins, and the way she carried herself, the combination of vulnerability and strength etched into her posture. He took another careful step forward, his focus entirely on her, as if every other presence in the room had become a peripheral detail, a soft blur against the clarity of the moment. Aisha adjusted the twins, ensuring their comfort, whispering gentle reassurances, and in that simple act, Ethan saw the embodiment of resilience and care, the culmination of years spent nurturing, protecting, and persevering through challenges she had faced alone. He felt the quiet weight of regret and longing press softly against him, a reminder of all that had been lost, and all that still might be reclaimed through the patience and courage present in her steady gaze. The golden light of the chandeliers refracted across the room, scattering into subtle patterns that seemed to accentuate the silent tension, highlighting the poised elegance of Aisha and the composed determination of Ethan as they navigated this delicate moment. Each measured step he took brought him incrementally closer, the physical distance shrinking while the emotional space remained charged with possibility, anticipation, and reflection. Aisha sensed his presence, a faint quickening of her pulse indicating the subtle recognition of years and emotions compressed into this encounter, and she allowed herself a small acknowledgement of the gravity in the air, the unspoken dialogue of past, memory, and hope that stretched invisibly between them. The twins stirred lightly, their tiny hands reaching instinctively, and she responded with calm, soothing words, a rhythm that reinforced her control and gentle authority. Ethan's gaze followed each movement, noting the grace, the quiet confidence, and the undeniable strength in the way she managed both herself and the children, and he felt an internal stirring, a mixture of awe, remorse, and the tentative hope that this evening could allow for a reconnection grounded in recognition, respect, and the enduring threads of shared history. Around them, the room continued its gentle hum of conversation and music, yet it seemed to fall away from their immediate awareness, leaving the subtle glow of chandeliers, the careful movement of bodies, and the quiet anticipation of what might unfold in the charged space between two people whose lives were reweaving after years of distance, absence, and unspoken understanding. In the calm of this suspended moment, Aisha and Ethan existed in a delicate balance, each aware of the presence and the weight of history, both poised on the cusp of acknowledgement. The twins nestled safely and peacefully between them as silent witnesses to the unfolding convergence of lives, memories, and the quiet promise of a shared future beginning to take shape. Aisha's eyes flickered with the soft reflection of chandelier light as she carefully positioned the twins on the plush play mat, their tiny hands exploring the texture while she kept a watchful, nurturing gaze. Ethan Caldwell had closed the distance, stepping carefully to avoid startling them, his expression composed yet betraying a quiet intensity that mirrored the years of absence and anticipation. The golden light refracted across the polished marble, casting subtle prisms on the walls and floor, illuminating the careful elegance of her movements, the calm precision she carried even while managing the twins, and the aura of resilience that seemed to radiate from her presence. The soft orchestral music blended seamlessly with the quiet hum of the guests, the muted conversation forming an almost imperceptible background to the charged space that had developed between them. Aisha glanced briefly at Ethan, recognition and subtle acknowledgement passing silently in her gaze. The years of distance and experience forming an invisible bridge that connected them in a delicate, unspoken way. Ethan observed every nuance, the slight tilt of her head, the controlled rhythm of her steps, the gentle assurance in the way she guided the twins, and he felt a swelling of emotion, a mixture of admiration, remorse, and hope that had lain dormant, now rising to the surface in a subtle, compelling force. Each step he took was deliberate, measured, the polished floor reflecting the soft glow above, and with each movement, he felt the invisible threads of time and memory drawing them closer, compressing years into a single charged present. Aisha adjusted the twins gently, whispering soft reassurances that carried a rhythm both soothing and authoritative, a reflection of the care and quiet strength she had honed over countless nights and long days of independent life. The twins stirred slightly, their tiny gestures a reminder of the shared connection that now anchored the moment, creating a bridge between past and present that neither of them had fully anticipated. Ethan's gaze lingered on her, noting the poise and confidence that had matured with time, the subtle radiance in her eyes, and the way she balanced gentleness and strength, each gesture speaking volumes of resilience and love. Aisha felt the quiet pressure of anticipation, her heartbeat responding to the presence of someone who had once been central to her life, the pull of recognition and the unspoken history forming a taut but tender current between them. The ambient light shimmered across the room, chandeliers scattering gentle reflections that danced on walls, floors, and fabric, creating a visual symphony that mirrored the tension and subtle intimacy of the moment. Each measured step Ethan took brought him closer, the emotional distance compressing alongside the physical, his awareness sharpened by the significance of the encounter, the awareness of years lost and moments that might now be reclaimed in understanding and acknowledgement. Aisha maintained her composed demeanor, guiding the twins gently, whispering to them with a steady cadence, a quiet assertion of control and nurturing, while internally she registered the unmistakable energy of Ethan's presence, the charged silence that enveloped them both. The soft hum of the orchestra, the quiet murmur of guests, and the distant city sounds outside the venue seemed to recede, leaving only the luminous space between them, where past memories, resilience, and tentative hope converged. The twins yawned and settled, their subtle movements anchoring the moment, and Ethan stepped forward just enough to close the remaining gap, the tension in the air holding the weight of unspoken words, shared histories, and the quiet anticipation of acknowledgement and connection that was finally becoming tangible after years of separation, their lives converging under the warm, golden light in a suspended, profoundly intimate moment. A soft hush seemed to settle over the space as Ethan Caldwell reached the twins, his gaze lifting to meet Aisha Bennett's with a depth that conveyed years of unspoken reflection and quiet yearning. The golden light from the chandeliers refracted across the polished floors, casting subtle prisms that danced over the walls and guests, creating a haloed stage for the moment that had quietly built between them. Aisha's eyes softened, a mixture of recognition, guarded hope, and steady resilience, reflecting the countless days and nights she had navigated alone, raising the twins and creating a life shaped by determination, patience, and love. Ethan extended his hand slowly, a deliberate gesture of acknowledgement, and she inclined her head subtly, allowing a moment for the invisible distance of years to compress, the weight of absence and memory folding into the present. The twins stirred, sensing the quiet gravity of the encounter, their tiny hands reaching instinctively toward him, and Aisha adjusted them gently, whispering reassurances in a tone that was calm, measured, and nurturing, a rhythm of life and care that had become second nature. Ethan knelt slightly to meet their gaze, his expression softened, and in that subtle lowering of stature, he communicated humility, recognition, and the latent affection that had persisted despite years of separation. The guests moved quietly around them, their conversations softened as if subconsciously aware that something significant unfolded in the center of the room, yet all peripheral to the private acknowledgement taking place between the three. Aisha's movements were deliberate as she positioned the twins comfortably, her attention divided between their safety and the silent conversation of eyes and gestures that flowed between her and Ethan. She could sense the subtle tremor in his hands, the small imperceptible catch in his breath, the long-held tension of unspoken remorse and enduring admiration, and she allowed herself to feel the quiet stirrings of possibility without relinquishing the control and composure that had become her shield and strength. The ambient music shifted slightly, the soft orchestral notes threading a gentle cadence that underscored the emotional weight of the moment, reflecting the poised elegance of her movements and the measured approach of his presence. Ethan extended his hand just enough to touch lightly the tiny fingers of the twins, his touch tentative but deliberate, a bridge not only across physical distance, but across the years of separation, the unvoiced experiences, and the quiet ache of moments missed. Aisha allowed the contact, her eyes meeting his, and in the shared gaze there was acknowledgement, understanding, and the first hint of trust returning, a fragile yet undeniable thread forming in the silent space between them. The chandeliers above scattered reflections across the room, catching in their eyes and emphasizing the warmth and subtle shimmer of emotion, the twins' soft movements adding a living rhythm to the unfolding scene. Ethan's voice broke the silence gently, measured and low, conveying recognition and quiet apology, and Aisha responded with a nod, subtle yet weighted with years of resilience, her own tone carrying calm authority and tentative openness. Each movement, each glance, became a dialogue without words, the convergence of past and present, of absence and connection, distilled into gestures, expressions, and the quiet interplay of trust, care, and acknowledgement. The twins settled peacefully, their presence grounding both Aisha and Ethan, their small breaths marking the rhythm of the new understanding that had begun to take hold, a living reminder of continuity, hope, and the promise of shared moments yet to come. The soft murmur of the room, the delicate glint of chandeliers, and the muted strains of the orchestra all coalesced around the private gravity of this encounter, holding them suspended in a moment that was at once tender, profound, and filled with the quiet possibility of reconciliation and the gentle reclamation of what had been lost to time. Aisha stepped back slightly, her hands still holding the twins securely as Ethan Caldwell moved closer, the space between them charged with the culmination of years, distance, and unspoken emotions. The soft golden light of the chandeliers reflected across the polished floors and walls, scattering delicate patterns that shimmered around them, and the gentle hum of conversation faded into near silence in their immediate awareness, creating a private, almost sacred space amidst the gala. Ethan's eyes softened as he took in the careful precision of her movements, the way she balanced attentiveness to the twins with a composed, graceful presence that radiated quiet authority, and he felt a profound recognition of the strength and resilience she had cultivated over the years. Aisha allowed herself a measured breath, sensing the sincerity in his gaze, the subtle vulnerability that contrasted with the formidable exterior he maintained in the corporate world. The twins stirred slightly, their tiny hands reaching instinctively, and she responded with gentle murmurs, their soft coos grounding both her and Ethan in the immediacy of the moment. Each movement, each glance, carried the weight of history, a silent dialogue of years apart, choices made, and endurance shaped by circumstance. Ethan knelt slightly to meet the height of the twins, his hands hovering near them, cautious and reverent, a tangible acknowledgement of their shared bond and the invisible threads connecting him to Aisha and their children. The orchestra shifted softly, the notes weaving through the room like a delicate underscore, highlighting the intimacy and gravity of the encounter while maintaining the gentle elegance of the evening. Aisha's gaze met his, steady and calm, yet tinged with the subtle vulnerability of someone who had survived, nurtured, and protected for years without support, and Ethan felt the full weight of admiration, regret, and burgeoning hope pressing gently in his chest. He extended a hand toward the twins, the movement slow and deliberate, and she guided them lightly, allowing the small connection to form, a bridge of trust, acknowledgement, and mutual recognition. The light caught in their eyes, highlighting the shared history and the quiet possibility of a future that had been postponed but never erased. Aisha adjusted her posture slightly, a soft smile brushing her lips, as the twins responded with tiny, instinctive movements that reflected comfort and recognition, a silent affirmation of the bond Ethan had sought without knowing the full extent of its permanence. He exhaled softly, the tension in his shoulders easing as he realized that the years of separation had brought perspective, patience, and the capacity to approach this reunion with respect, care, and quiet reverence. Around them, the gala continued with muted energy, the gentle clinking of glassware, subdued conversation, and soft music providing a backdrop that emphasized rather than disrupted the private significance of the moment. Each step Ethan took, each subtle gesture, was met with a measured response from Aisha, the unspoken language of acknowledgement, respect, and cautious trust flowing between them with each exchange. The twins settled, their breathing even and peaceful, and in that small, intimate rhythm, the space between Aisha and Ethan seemed to contract, the weight of absence and memory giving way to the delicate promise of reconciliation, understanding, and the shared recognition of a family that had endured time, distance, and circumstance, now converging into the gentle possibility of a renewed connection marked by trust, love, and mutual respect in the golden glow of the evening. A warm glow filled the room as Aisha Bennett settled into a quiet corner, the twins nestled safely against her chest, their tiny breaths soft and steady. The chandeliers above scattered light across the polished floors, casting delicate reflections that danced subtly on the walls and ceiling, creating an atmosphere of calm elegance that framed the convergence of past and present. Ethan Caldwell approached with deliberate steps, his eyes tracing the contours of her form and the gentle movements of the twins, each motion a testament to the years she had spent nurturing, protecting, and enduring with quiet strength. He reached a measured distance, allowing space for comfort and trust, his presence both commanding and careful, a reflection of the balance he maintained between authority and empathy. Aisha glanced at him briefly, recognition and the faintest smile softening her composed expression, a subtle acknowledgement of shared history and the possibility of renewed connection. The twins stirred slightly, their small hands curling instinctively, and she whispered softly to them, her voice steady, calm, and nurturing, a rhythm that carried reassurance and warmth. Ethan's gaze lingered on her, absorbing every nuance, the gentle tilt of her head, the careful movements as she adjusted the twins, the way her eyes carried the quiet fire of resilience honed over years apart, and he felt a swell of emotion, a mixture of awe, admiration, and a longing that had never fully faded. The room around them continued its subdued hum, the soft orchestral music blending seamlessly with the muted conversations of guests, creating a backdrop that emphasized rather than disrupted the private significance of the moment. Aisha's posture remained poised, her presence radiating confidence and maternal care, and Ethan felt the invisible weight of years of distance, missed moments, and unspoken words begin to shift, replaced by the quiet possibility of acknowledgement and understanding. He lowered himself slightly to be at the twins' level, his hands hovering delicately, as if to affirm connection without overstepping, and she allowed the subtle interaction, her eyes meeting his with a steady calm, the unspoken trust between them beginning to take root. The golden light played across their features, highlighting the depth of expression in their eyes, the gentle curve of Aisha's smile, and the subtle shift in Ethan's posture that reflected both reverence and the tentative hope of reconnection. Each movement, each glance, carried layered meaning, the endurance of years apart, the growth that absence had fostered, and the delicate formation of renewed bonds. The twins cooed softly, responding instinctively to the warmth and attention of both parents, grounding the moment in the tangible presence of shared life. Ethan exhaled gently, the tension in his shoulders easing as he absorbed the significance of what had unfolded, the silent acknowledgement that the years of separation had created perspective, patience, and a deeper appreciation for the quiet strength Aisha embodied. The soft music, the shimmering reflections, and the gentle murmur of the gala around them became a distant, almost cinematic backdrop as the focus narrowed entirely to the three of them, connected by history, shared resilience, and the promise of family. Aisha felt a sense of closure in the gentle interactions. The recognition of Ethan's presence balanced with her control and composure, and the room seemed to hold its breath as the twins nestled peacefully. Their soft movements a reminder of continuity, hope, and the enduring power of connection. The light shimmered across their faces, highlighting the warmth, trust, and tentative joy that had quietly grown between them. And in that suspended, intimate moment, the weight of the past lifted just enough to allow the first tangible steps toward a future together, one marked by understanding, care, and the shared rhythm of a family once fractured and now gently reuniting under the golden glow of the evening.